Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and all of you ladies working on building a healthy lifestyle, trying to lose weight, trying to be consistent with exercise or movement, or maintain your weight loss, you're going to want to hang in for today's show. Joining me today is Jodi Dolo. Jodi's a certified nutritionist and a personal trainer who has lost and maintained a 90-pound weight loss after a health scare in 2017. After being diagnosed with hypertension at the early age of 35, she transformed her lifestyle to become healthier than she'd ever been. Now at 42, Jodi co-hosts the Mindful Muscle podcast with her friend Gio, where they focus on helping beginners make sustainable changes. She also co-leads a body positivity group, supporting others in overcoming body image struggles and building confidence. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Same. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. When I saw your story and some of the work you guys were doing, I knew I wanted to have you on the show and hear a little bit more about your story because I think it's so important for people to have examples and to see people just like themselves who have gone through a similar journey. So kick us off. Tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of what this journey of building a healthy lifestyle has looked like for you.
It has changed my relationship with myself. I have tried to lose weight several times before, but it was never for the right reason. It was always to try to fit in with others and hope that people would like me. But this journey has forced me to treat myself like somebody I love. And because of it, I'm more my most authentic self, and I'm not afraid to be who I am.
Oh, I love that. I'm so excited to hear that that's the primary thing that you got out of it, that you feel like you're more authentic now and you have this self-love and can feel confident in showing up as who you really are. That's a big deal. Because when you get to that point, that's really transformative. The fact that you're leading with that stands out to you more than the actual weight loss or the level of fitness or level of shape that you're in, that's a big statement. But I guess I would be remiss if I didn't add that from everyone I've talked to and from my own personal journey, that doesn't typically happen overnight. You don't just suddenly wake up and have that flip of a switch where you're madly in love with yourself and have full-on acceptance. But if we can at least get to that spot where we recognize that there's parts of us that we really do love and that we are thankful that we have. And while we might not have that full 100% acceptance or 100% self-love, we can at least start to call out the pieces that we are thankful for and recognize that there are lots of really great things about us. And we can start peeling away that onion, start peeling away the pieces that we do want to work on. For you, you've found this self-love. This is a newfound self-acceptance, self-love, and that initiated from a health scare, right? So with the onset of this change in your trajectory being a result of a scare like that, was this like a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm going to do it this time and here's what I'm going to do different? Like, how did you slide into making this the time and the time that really stuck?
Right before I started feeling heart palpitations, I was at work and a manager that was in his 50s, we found out he went to bed that night feeling a little off and he never woke up again.
Wow.
And it really made you think like, wow, we should not ignore these things. We need to get it checked out. And I'm somebody who doesn't like to make doctor's appointments, or I used to be like that. But it made me make an appointment to be like, hey, I'm feeling heart palpitations. I don't know what this is. So that's what led me into making the appointment. And they actually connected me to an EKG machine to see if I did damage to my heart because of my blood pressure.
So that's scary in itself, right?
Yeah. 35, I was pushing 230 pounds. And I thought, wow, I had a father growing up who had so many health issues, and I watched him in and out of the hospital constantly. And I have two boys. I thought, I don't want this for them. I don't want them to see that as their norm like I did. So instead of trying to lose weight to fit in, it became, I need to do something about my health.
That's such a big shift, doing it for your health versus just doing it to look good or fit in a certain size. So with that backdrop and knowing that you really leaned into this with those scares behind you and feeling like this really was about your health, I'm curious. I know one of the things you talk about is the statistic about people gaining it back. The numbers are huge with people gaining it back. And you said yourself, and I'll put my hand up, those cycles of losing big amounts of weight and then gaining it back, a lot of times gaining more than you started with, that is what happens more often than not. So what makes it different this time? Because now you're going on, was it 4 or 5 years?
Since I've been at this size, yes. But it's funny, when I first started, I thought if I get under 200 pounds, that seems a little far-fetched. But because it was about my health, it's like, it doesn't matter what the scale said. I'm just going to keep going. And because I made sustainable lifestyle changes, it wasn't to quick lose weight for vacation. It was, I need to get a handle of this because, I'm not anti-medication. I was put on medication for the blood pressure, but I feel like that just becomes the start. And then you see all those commercials with side effects include anxiety and depressive thoughts and suicidal thoughts and diarrhea. And it's like, I didn't want to have to like grow onto those, usually if you get put on one medication, you either develop another issue by not making changes, or you need medication to combat the side effects from the first medication. So
vicious cycle. Yeah.
So it became about my health, and it didn't matter what the scale said. And as I was starting to make changes and feeling a difference, I didn't realize how crappy I felt before until I stopped feeling crappy. Like, my husband told me that I used to snore, and I was completely offended when he told me, oh, no, I didn't. But I'm like, okay, I am sleeping better. Maybe there was other components that, we just become blind to. We don't realize how lousy we feel until we start making those changes.
One of the things I love in the way that you talk about it is you do talk about and you stress the slow and sustainable changes, because I also lost a bunch of weight, still working on that. Very long journey for me, really slow. But the key for me is you can't give up everything. You can't go, I want to live the next 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever years, wherever you're at, saying, I'm never going to have the ice cream cone. I always use ice cream or chips because those are like my things. But I mean, you have to be able to have a balance, and finding a way to do it slowly in a way you can sustain. I just think that's the only way that really works in the end. And I know you talk about that as well.
Absolutely. I feel like when we label foods as good or bad, we eventually will lose control. And then we get into that mindset, well, I'm already being bad. I'm just going to eat everything in sight and I'll start over tomorrow. And it's like, you're going to consume more calories than you would if you just work those little treats in your day and into your calories.
That's that all or nothing thinking, right? I'm being bad, so let me continue to be bad, right? It's just, let me just do it while I'm here before I go back on, or before I start trying to be good again. It's a little mind-boggling what our minds can do.
One of the things I like to say is there are some really awful human beings that eat salads. And there are people who do charitable work and they eat cupcakes. Like, it doesn't change who you are as a person.
Right. Before we started recording, we were just talking about Tara DeLeon, somebody that we both have interviewed. One of the things that she says that I love is, my size, my weight is the least interesting thing about me, right? So many of us have so much going for us, and we get so fixated on that number on the scale. And it really is the least interesting thing about us. In fact, I think one of the things you talk about is how we underestimate the fact that there's so much fluctuation and how much the scale shouldn't really play a role in our life. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's funny, that health scare scared me so much, but it's such a blessing because the amount of fluctuations I've seen, I would have given up. There was a year between 2018 and 2019 where I only lost a total of 12 pounds the entire year. I wanted to rip my hair out for so many weeks. Like I would gain a pound, then I would lose a pound. But then I looked at my family portraits from that October to the following October, and it was completely different. Like in the first family picture, I'm still hiding behind my kids. I always felt the need to hide behind somebody.
Oh, I
and
get
then
you,
the following year, not yeah. And like the following year, like my face is a different shape. My shoulders are back. None of my kids are in front of me. I am taking up space proudly. So my body was completely different, but you could see a difference in the mindset between the two pictures. 12-pound difference, though.
Right. But in our mind, when we're playing that scale game, you can get sucked into the, woe is me, this isn't working, I'm not doing anything. So important to make sure we're keying in on those other indicators, how we feel, how our clothes fit, how we're moving, because maybe it isn't a weight loss thing, but maybe we're moving more because we're getting more exercise and movement in our daily life. Whatever it is, I think it's so important to key in on those. Let's talk about mindset a little bit because you mentioned it. And I wanted to ask about the body positivity group that you're part of. I've been hearing a ton about these groups, and that wasn't a thing at least it wasn't a thing that I knew of 10 years ago. And now I think it's a big thing. It's kind of rising up and there's a lot of them. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and what that community means and how it helps people.
I love the group because it originally started because I met a friend online named Samantha, and her and I would quietly message each other and be like, I feel terrible. I'm looking in the mirror. I'm seeing something I don't like, or we were planning on going to a fitness retreat with other fitness people. And both her and I were like, what if I'm not fit enough? What if people look at me and say, she doesn't belong here? And we realized as we were getting closer to the trip and we had such an amazing time, we found out everybody there had the same thoughts go through their head. And then as we were posting, like our other friends that said they couldn't go, they're like, I have FOMO now. I really wish I would have went, but I had similar mindset. And it's like, we go through these things quietly.
Yeah.
And when we suffer in silence, we think this is a me problem. There's something drastically wrong with me. And yet talking about it doesn't make it ever go away, but it feels normal.
Yes.
You can talk about it. You can get the support. You know you're not alone.
Yeah.
And there's power in that.
Yes. Have you had experience with, and now you're in a much smaller body. Have you had experience along the way or even now still where you look in the mirror or you look at the pictures or you think about something you might want to buy to wear or whatever, and you still sort of have that feeling of you're the heavier person? Does that happen still 4 years later?
Not as often. I would get into the bad habit of buying the wrong size. I would buy larger and then I would get it and it would be baggy. I'm like, why do I keep doing that to myself? Why do I feel weird ordering the smaller size? Because I spent so many years in a bigger body that it just feels far-fetched.
I think that's important for people to hear because, again, to normalize. I think sometimes when people go through big transitions and they lose a lot of weight, they still see the old person and they still think of themselves as the old person. So I think that's, I've heard that's a common thing. So I think it's important to let people know that happens.
Oh, yeah.
I guess with time, you just keep working on it. And
yeah, I know for a lot of people, they have hesitancy walking into the gym because they're worried about what other people are going to think of them. I promise you, the gym is full of people who have body image issues and they are afraid of what you think of them.
Yeah.
Most of the time. People who compete in bodybuilding shows still, like Mr. Olympian came out a couple years ago saying he has body dysmorphia. And it's like, This is more of an issue and it's more common than we realize.
Well, I think what I've been learning from talking to so many people is I almost want to say it doesn't matter what size you are. And I do want to say it doesn't matter. I just think there's so much pressure. There's so much pressure from society, from things handed down in the family, from things we learn, I don't know, when we're little, but whatever, all the things that sits with us to be a certain person, to look a certain way, to do certain things. And all that pressure and all those expectations, we can never live up to that. No matter who you are and what you're at, you feel a lot of times you feel like you can't live up to it. So I think it can affect people at any size. And I think that surprised me.
Absolutely. And any gender, because there are men that go to our group and a lot of people would have wrongfully assumed this is a woman issue, but no, the men feel it too. I mean, it might not be necessarily about their weight, but it could be their muscles aren't big enough.
Yeah.
They get that drilled into their head constantly.
Yeah, there's always something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you have 2 boys. How old are they?
10 and 13.
Fun. That 13-year-old must be starting to be really fun. So what are you doing differently than, so I mean, I imagine you're doing some things differently to try to have them have a better relationship with their body and a better relationship with food than you did. I guess I'm making an assumption. Is that an accurate assumption?
Yeah.
And what are you doing differently than how you were brought up?
I didn't realize how many people got messed up by this until, recent years when you see all the memes and reels out there. But the Clean Plate Club really messed up a lot of people in my generation.
Yeah.
Where you couldn't leave the table unless your plate was perfectly clean.
Yeah.
And I don't do that with my kids. I don't say any food is good or bad. I say, hey, oh, you picked blueberries? That's great because they're full of fiber and fiber helps avoid cardiovascular disease. Like I say things like that so that they know, but I don't say if food is good or bad. And most importantly, I am careful how I talk about myself in front of them.
That's a big one.
Because if I am trashing myself, they're going to think that's normal to talk about themselves that way.
Yeah.
And especially my oldest looks a lot like me. So if I'm like picking myself apart and he looks like me, that doesn't bode well for him, especially at this teenage age,
I agree. As a grandma, I recognize this more now than I did with my own kids. They are watching and learning with everything we do. And I also think you're onto something with that Clean Plate Club. So true. I talk about that being one of the real epiphanies for me. And the reversal of that is something that I still reinforce regularly to ensure I do the opposite and to ensure I leave something on the plate so I don't get caught up in that thinking again, even if it's just a couple of bites, because it's a great reminder to yourself. Because, you have all those thoughts of, especially eating out, you have all these thoughts of, I just paid X amount of dollars, or, I'm not going to get this again because you're out and somebody made it for you, whatever, all the thoughts. And so you want to eat it all. But the truth is, so what? So what if you leave $2 on the plate, right? Or so you can go back out and get it again if you really enjoyed it. But I think you have to shift that, work on shifting that thought process. That was a big help for me.
Absolutely.
So I agree. I guess we were all trained. I'm a lot older than you, but I guess we were all trained too. I'm 55. Mm-hmm. So I've got a good 10 years on you, more than that. But yeah, I think that's a really great one to learn and of course to teach as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to switch gears. I want to talk about social media a little bit. It can be great. We found each other through social media and there's so much information at your fingertips, all the things, right? But it also can be really hard to navigate. And I know that you had an experience with someone, I'm going to say borrowing, you guys, I'm using air quotes, borrowing her before and after pictures. Talk to us a little bit about that. What happened?
Believe it or not, I got a DM on Facebook saying, I think somebody's using your photos on this group that was like pushing like steroids and supplements and training services. And they said I did it within a year, my entire weight loss. And they beefed up the weight difference too. So by their calculations, I now weigh 81 pounds, which no, I do not.
Yeah, because it was like 150 pounds or something, or
Yeah.
in a year or something. Yeah, because that's what caught my attention. I was like, wait, what?
And I'm just like, that is my biggest pet peeve. I've had a few people try to cheer me up and say, take that as a compliment. I don't take that as a compliment because I was that person that was in a bigger body looking for hope. And then you see these posts and it's complete lies. And then you, like, when you try it, you're out the money. And when it doesn't work, you feel like a failure once again.
You feel like it's you. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's not the first time it's happened. And it's like, if your product and service really worked, you don't need to steal from me.
Right.
You should have a lot of testimonials to back your story up. Real testimonials, not you saying I took this herbal supplement or whatever they're trying to sell. And I try to aim to help the person that was like me before. So that person that was looking that this is possible to do. And I look out for that version of me. And when people are purposely telling a false narrative and wasting their time, yeah, slow and steady might seem like not good to some people, but like the sooner you start that path, the sooner you'll get to where you want.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing the start, stop cycle nonstop, you're never going to get to where you want to be.
I love that you guys, because both you and Gio, you talk about trying to help that version of you. And he's lost some weight too. So that version of yourselves before you got started. And you talk about trying to give them small, sustainable things, changes that they can make to help them get started on their journey. So share with us a couple things. If you had to give, if you're talking to the listeners now, if there's people out there that haven't gotten started or they got started and they stalled out and they're wanting to get started again, what are some of those small, sustainable changes you would recommend that won't feel so big?
I like to call it the 5-minute rule.
Okay.
So if you don't feel like putting in any kind of movement, it seems overwhelming, I say just tell yourself do 5 minutes. 5 minutes of something. And if after 5 minutes you're not feeling it, that's okay. Because 5 minutes of doing something is better than spending hours thinking about doing something and not doing it.
That's valid. Yeah.
And even just small things like drinking more water, or I'm a big fan of tracking fiber intake. Like, I feel like that's not talked about enough because there's so many health benefits. You lower your risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. So do what you can to get more fiber in, even if it's just blueberries or broccoli, just one extra serving of fruit or vegetable a day than you're doing currently. It doesn't have to be like a complete 180 change.
I love that. I love the fiber one because I think it fills you up, right? And I don't think people talk about it. But the other thing you just alluded to, I feel like it's a trend now, but I love it. I'm on board with this trend. It's adding versus taking away.
Yes.
So to your point, don't make the big shift to do a full 180, but what can you put on your plate extra in addition? So we're not taking anything away, but can you put a fruit, put a vegetable,
Exactly.
I don't know, whatever, put some chia seeds or flax seeds into something that you're eating, a pudding or whatever you're doing. There's ways to add that will bring you benefit, even if you don't take away. So I think that's a really great trend.
Exactly. And even parking your car further away from the store, so you have to put in more steps. It can be small changes, but like the more you get used to it, you might even start making additional changes without even really thinking about it too.
Yeah. And did you start that way when you had this health scare? Did you start small or did you start really big and then have to reel it in? Because my guess is you got scared. So you tried to go all in.
I did not want to track my food intake at all. At all. And
girl, you're speaking to me. That's one of my biggest battles. But every time I really start to veer, I'm like, pull out that tracker because ultimately it is what will get your attention. But go ahead. Sorry.
I spent almost a month just going to the gym 5 days a week. And I really didn't know what I was doing at the time. And the thought of talking to a trainer was just no. I was intimidated to be at the gym in the first place, but The most I lost in that first month was maybe 5 pounds. And when you're starting at 230 pounds, 5 pounds is not a lot. So
Yeah.
I actually hit pause in the exercise and I started doing Weight Watchers at the time only because I had a small group of friends that were doing Weight Watchers. So to me, it was nice to have somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I wish I would have just went to calorie counting instead of doing Weight Watchers. But the thing about this journey is you don't have to have everything perfectly ironed out from the beginning. You can pivot and make changes. You're going to make changes along the way.
Ding, ding, ding. That's gold. Pause there. Because not only are you going to make changes along the way, I find from now talking to a bunch of people besides just my friends, right? But everybody's different. And so I think that's one of the key things of trying to jump on all these different programs or all these different diets or all these different things. None of them fit everybody. So I truly feel like you got to take a little bit from this and a little bit from that and a little bit and just really find what works for you and switch it. Switch it when it doesn't work anymore or it doesn't feel like it's the right thing.
It's not going to be wasted time. You will learn something about yourself or that process by just trying it. And if you have to make changes, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a failure.
So you resisted tracking, but you ultimately did track because you went to Weight Watchers and then you said, yeah, so you ultimately did. And it's helpful, right? You're laughing because I get it. It's like a pain in the butt, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing with Weight Watchers is like, I felt like they were I know they're called Weight Watchers, Jodi, but like they were too weight specific. Like when I went through that year where I only lost 12 pounds, every time I would have a gain, it'd be like, oh, Jodi, better luck next time. And it's like, if you would have saw the pictures, you wouldn't be saying that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a failure if the scale goes up. And I actually unintentionally ate too low carb on Weight Watchers to save points. And with my activity level, I was tired all the time and napping every day that I had an opportunity to take a nap. And then I'd go to CrossFit and they did like a nutrition challenge where you had to give up one thing for 90 days. And instead of something tangible, I said, you know what? I'm going to give up Weight Watchers and I'm going to try calorie counting. And if it doesn't work out, I can switch back. Within a week, I noticed a difference in my energy levels because I was eating more carbs.
Wow. That's a great lesson though, because people are scared of carbs and it's, you just got to find the right balance, I think, for you. But yeah, I think anytime you get into really eliminating anything, you get into trouble. That's my 2 cents. But yeah. So ultimately, then you ended up just tracking on your own. Do you still track? You do.
Because I weight lift, I have a protein goal, and I also tracked my fiber intake goal. So for those 2 reasons, I am still on top of tracking.
Wow, that's fabulous. I really do think it is a key to making it more successful because you can't hide anything from yourself when it's written right there, right? I mean, you have to be honest with yourself. So yeah, good for you. Let's talk about the exercise for a minute. So you said you started right off with 5 days in the gym. So that was a big commitment. And for those that don't know you or know your work, I mean, you are into weightlifting. You're in the gym. I don't want to say a gym rat. I kind of did, but I don't know what the word is, right? But you went from never and not wanting to be there, and now it's a core part of your life.
It's funny, when I first started in the gym, I would avoid the free weight section. And I know those listening to this won't be able to see it, but my first tattoo is a barbell and a heart. Now, it's funny how things change drastically, but I know one common question I get a lot is, do you have loose skin? I do have some, but it's not as bad as it would be if I didn't lift heavy because, my arms were big before. They're big now, but they're muscular.
That is a common question and a common concern. And certainly people have options if they're really worried about it. But ultimately, and there's people out there, right, that have a lot more weight to lose even than you at 230. I think I know some of the people listening will think, well, that's not really that big. But the bottom line is you're always going to be healthier with that carrying around that extra skin than you were carrying around the fat and the extra skins. And you get to choose. If you want to do something about it, I guess you can do something about it. But ultimately, you're still going to be in a healthier body. And for so many health advantages, I guess you got to get through that piece of being vain and worrying about the skin, because you're still going to feel better.
Absolutely. And honestly, I love being a strong woman. Absolutely love it. My son a few weeks ago broke his 2 bones in his arm, and I had to carry him into the ER. He's 10 years old, and I was able to do that without struggling.
Love that. I love that. Strength training is one of the things that I've been talking about a lot, because especially as we age as women, so important to fortify ourselves and build that strength so that we can continue in our 60s and 70s and 80s and maybe even 90s, where we can, even if it's just I can open the jar on my own, or I can put my suitcase in the overhead, whatever it is, having the ability to do those things. It's so key to still feeling like you're living a independent, productive life. So I think that's important. And you don't necessarily have to live in the gym, but you can find a way to make that work in your life too.
Absolutely. I remember before my youngest's last birthday, my oldest said, "Oh, this is you're now going to be in double digit ages. You know, being in triple digit age is very rare. I bet mom will do it." And I'm like, wait, what makes you think that? He says, "Mom, you are very healthy. You work out a lot." I'm like,
oh, I love that.
Okay, you guys are noticing that.
Yes.
So good.
Right. I love that. That's great for you and for them to have that thought process. Congratulations, because that's a big deal and a big shift. My last question for you before we wrap up is, what's the best healthy living type, I'll kind of generalize it, advice you ever got or you give now?
It's always what you do next, not what you did last, that determines your success. Perfection is the enemy of good enough. You cannot expect yourself to be 100% perfect every day. Nobody is. And if they are, you need to unfollow them because they're lying to you.
So true. Great advice. Great advice. Well, I want to remind everybody that I am going to put the links to Mindful Muscle out there in the show notes and ask everybody to check you guys out. Fairly new, fairly young on YouTube starting this podcast, but some great episodes out there, I will say. I've been enjoying them. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and your journey. It's been great getting to know a little bit more about you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.